Welcome to the Growth Catalyst Show, where we believe that growth could come in many forms: professional, personal, company, sales, you name it. I'm your host, Dan Mahoney, founder of Transcendent Sales Solutions and a guide to a world of growth possibilities. I've spent my career empowering companies and their people with strategies that accelerate growth. I'm here to bring you stories of these business leaders and their trusted advisors to gain insights into their journeys and learn how they fuel their own growth. Just maybe their journey could become part of your own growth story. Are you ready? Let's grow. Welcome to the next episode of the Growth Catalyst Show. My name is Dan Mahoney. I'm your host. I'd like to introduce you my next guest. Richard Reimer is the managing partner of Initiating Protection, a law firm focused solely on brand protection. They help businesses owners identify, protect, and monetize their most valuable asset, their brand. Richard received his undergraduate degree from the University of Georgia, go Dogs, and has a law degree from Georgia State University. The main focus of Richard's life is his wife and 4 daughters. Richard Reimer, welcome to the Growth Catalyst Show.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
It's great to have you. So and one of the things I love about doing the show is I get to learn as I do some research about all my guests. And I learned a few things about you this morning. First of all, I'm going to guess that you might be a Georgia native or no?
I am a Georgia native. In fact, 3 of my 4 grandparents were born in Georgia. I like to tell people that I can trace land ownership in Cobb County in my family back to 1861.
Wow. 1861. That's amazing. So generations of Reimers in the Cobb County, basically all of Cobb County or all through Georgia?
Through time, they spread out, but it sort of originated in Cobb County and points west and points north. But yeah, pretty much in Cobb.
So I saw you went to Sprayberry High School and you graduated there. And I knew you had went to UGA, but the thing that I was surprised is you actually started out with a whole different track as an accountant.
I had a very different track. One degree you missed in there is I have a master's in taxation from Georgia State as well. So I had an undergraduate degree from UGA, practiced for several years at a small accounting firm, learned that tax was the most fun of all those elements that an accountant might do. Went back and got a master's in taxation and started working in the big 4 firms. And let's just say I decided based on that experience that there was a better route out there for me.
Yeah, you were with Gray, and then you did some work at KPMG.
I did.
So what was it like, working for a big law firm like that? Were you doing mostly tax or audit or what was your specialty there?
It was tax exclusively there. The thing I didn't quite appreciate at the small firm that I got my original experience in, I had a lot of client contact. I love the client contact. I love being a trusted advisor. When you went to a large entity like KPMG or Gray as a younger person, I really had very little client contact. I had a lot of spreadsheets in my life, a lot of work papers in my life, a lot of tax returns in my life, and not a lot of people in my life. And that really wasn't that fulfilling because I saw that my people 2 and 3 levels above me had a very similar existence. And I really wanted to be in a people business, not a paper business.
You were in a cube business, basically just sitting there and running the numbers.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a cube farm. And I enjoyed my cube mates, but we were all sitting there charging away with spreadsheets. It really wasn't a lot of fun.
So tell me what gave you the itch to say, like, you know what, I'm going to do a career? Because I've seen many people that do that career shift, but to career shift from, being a tax accountant to law, what was that change? And what initiated that?
It sort of is backwards. I was the 8-year-old who went around telling people that I was going to go to law school. And at the time, I really didn't know what that meant. I came from a very modest family, blue-collar family. My dad was a career electrician. My mom was a teacher's assistant. Most of my neighbors went to work in a truck and swung a hammer for a living. That was the type of experience I had growing up. And I had 2 lawyers in my life that really just sort of impacted me. One was a soccer coach and one was a professor later on. And based on my experience with them, I said, I really want to practice law. I think that the type of person, the type of impact that they have is really who and what I want to be when I grow up. But reality came into play, and I paid for my own way through undergrad school. And when I graduated, I realized I had an option to start making money using my accounting degree or continuing to go into debt, getting a legal degree. And to that 22-year-old, that decision was easy. So I started my profession in accounting. But the 8-year-old never went away. He kept on saying, when are we going to law school?
So did the 22-year-old ever think like maybe I could just go the CPA route and be a tax CPA versus do the
Well, that's
law?
exactly what I did. I was a CPA. I held my
Oh,
certificate for
okay.
over 15 years. I had a master's
Okay.
in taxation. Matter of fact, a lot of my classmates in my master's in taxation program were law school students getting the equivalent of an LLM, a master's in tax and law. So I had very much the same training they had. I was just going to focus on the numbers more so than the law. But the reality is, as the many CPAs you know can attest, they're practicing law in some way, imagine in some way, stretch or whatever. And the difference that I saw, and there's one story that just resonates very clearly with me when the moment came that the 8-year-old beat the 22-year-old. And I was at KPMG at the time. I went to a meeting with my partner who had been practicing for 25 years. He was a CPA, a partner at KPMG for a decade by that point. Had gone to the Wharton School, had every credential you could imagine. Incredibly sharp man. We were going to meet with his best client, who owned the largest S corporation in the United States at the time, and his that man's tax attorney. And I noticed and I was there to take notes, by the way. That was my value to the meeting, was taking notes.
Take good notes, Richard.
And I noticed during the meeting that as my partner, who I had great respect for, was talking, the client was zoning out. But the second the attorney spoke, the client whipped his head and started focusing on him, even though the attorney wasn't much older than I was. He was way closer in experience to me than he was to Tim. And I'm like, so people pay more attention to lawyers. I don't know if I like that or don't like that, but if that's the rule, I can play that game. I can go get a JD. It's not that hard. And then I can be that trusted tax advisor or that trusted business advisor. Also, at the same time, I was learning that tax really wasn't where I wanted to be. So when I went to law school, I was thinking, one, I wanted to be a trusted business advisor. And two, I wanted to do anything other than tax.
Yeah, so I was going to ask that. Like, that was one of the things. So you didn't think about being a tax attorney.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people law school was the eject button from my tax career.
So a question I'm dying to ask you: what was harder, taking the bar or the CPA exam?
The CPA exam is much harder. Much harder.
I've heard that from people, which is crazy.
It is crazy. The bar exam is much like your hardest high school test on steroids. You need to cram your head full of facts. You don't, oddly, need to show a lot of reasoning. Now, to go through law school and to get into law school, you need to show a lot of reasoning. But the bar exam itself, I would argue, is slap down a lot of facts, make it look like you put them together in some reasonable way, and boom, you've got to pass a grade.
So you had so anything other than tax was the way you wanted to get into law. What made you choose intellectual property and IP?
Well, Dan's a common story in my story today, or common theme of my story today, is people. It was the people I met, the people I came in contact with, and very specifically in this story, it was the people I worked with during my summer associate job between my 2 final years of law school. I went to work for a law firm that was a 35-person firm in Atlanta that had just joined a large national firm. And the guy I was working with had a dual practice where he did both corporate work and IP work. And he was attracted to me because of my CPA background. I thought I'd be a great fit in the corporate practice. I was looking for a job and I liked him as a person. So sure, I thought that was a great fit. I accepted the job. But I soon learned that I enjoyed his IP side of his practice way more than his corporate side of his practice. And I remember after he, as a summer associate, you sort of turn in large projects and the partner will talk to you about your experience and, give you constructive feedback or whatever. And he asked me, how did you like the project? I said, like it. I love it. I mean, is this really a job? Do people get paid for this? I'd gone through a decade or so of being a tax accountant where I never felt fulfillment. And now all of a sudden I'm like solving my favorite puzzle for work and it's fun. So that was the beginning. I never looked back after that moment. I wanted to be an IP attorney.
And you worked for a couple big firms,
Yes.
Local and national firms. Started your business about 3 years ago, correct?
Yes, exactly. It'll be 3 years in June.
So what gave you the itch to say, you know what, I'm done with the big firms and I want to go out and not only practice what I love, but be an entrepreneur?
Unlike my experience with big firms in the accounting field, my experience with big firms in the law field was very different. I loved them. I have nothing negative to say about big firms. If you're looking for a podcast that bashes the largest 100 firms, this is not the one. But this is the podcast that I'll let you know that while those large firms serve large clients incredibly well, they're a horrible fit for small and mid-sized companies. And I realized about, I'd say 15 years into my career that the vast majority of companies that I was going after on behalf of my large clients were small and mid-sized companies. And as I was letting them know all the legal, wherefores of why they were infringing my clients' rights and doing something wrong, the response I got back from them was, I didn't know. And I realized this was an underserved community. This was an undereducated community in this area. They were uninformed. They were ignorant. And ignorant is not a slam. It just means you don't know something. Mm-hmm. And I realized that these people, too, they're small and mid-sized business owners. They're my neighbors. They're the people that make the PTA, the Little League, and all the other civic functions of my society run. And here I am doing things that doesn't help them. Now, I think what I did on behalf of my big clients was absolutely ethical, moral, legal. Matter of fact, it's what should be done. But this side didn't know the laws, didn't know the rules, and was running afoul of them all the time. So I made it a mission to start helping these people. And I began by trying to do it from the platform of a large firm. As I just said, that's not a good fit. And that's not a slam on small business or big firms. It's just not a good fit. And I realized that if I really wanted to serve that community, I needed to create my own platform. And so that's why I started my firm.
So let's talk to us in the audience. There are 8-year-olds as it relates to IP protection and intellectual property, because again, I think a lot of it is that education, and we don't know what we don't know. Just in a general sense, talk about some of the mistakes that you see that companies are either doing with their own brands or maybe infringing other folks, other companies' brands.
Well, great question, Dan. The first thing I like to emphasize is intellectual property is not an option. Much like the economy, you can't choose to not participate in the economy when it's a recession. If the recession is going on, you're going to be impacted. So whether you want to accept it or not, intellectual property does impact your success. Your growth plans do have intellectual property as a component of them. And I want to help companies maximize the return and minimize the risk along the way. So what are some of these simple things that people might be doing that they don't know? The most common thing I see is the person who starts a business with a name that was chosen at random. The randomness could be your last name. The randomness could be the name of your favorite pet. It could be some name that you saw on the wall of the bar where you were as you're scratching on the bar napkin, the plans for your business. It could be any of these things. And you think that because it sort of was a moment of inspiration or aha to you, that you have an absolute right to use it. And that is absolutely incorrect. I had a conversation just this week with a person I respect a lot who's not a lawyer, person in marketing. And their client, who they were talking to me about, was changing the name of the company to their last name. And I was informing them that this was a bad decision, that this would be a direct infringement. There's already a company out there using that name in connection with very similar products, and them using their last name would be infringement. And the point that they try to make is, but it's my last name. And my point back was, but it doesn't matter. It does not matter. There are no excuses for infringement. Now, maybe that makes you not a willful infringer. If we want to have a longer podcast, we talk about why that's important. But infringement's infringement, and innocent or not, you can be forced to change your name. You could be forced to give your profits that you made under that name to the other party. If they have a registration to prove that you're willful, it could be 3 times your profits plus their lawyer's fee. You could have to disgorge all of your items that you have with the name on them. I mean, it's a career-ending or business-ending decision for a lot of small businesses. So, number one, clear your name. Understanding whether or not your name has a potential time bomb inside of it is a very simple matter. Just to share prices for a second, for $400, I can give you a whole lot of insight into what sort of risk you have, what sort of opportunities you have. And if you're planning on growing your business, it seems like a very simple investment to make to keep you from having to have a major rebrand down the line.
That's eye-opening. I mean, again, I don't know if your client's name was Johnson, but
It wasn't.
if
It
you,
was an odd
yeah,
last name.
yeah. So I mean, if your name is Mahoney, you even if it's a great Irish name like Mahoney, you really have to still worry about that if you put that inside of a name.
Absolutely. And one thing to think of too is not just your name, but other names. When you have that clever idea and you're like, this is wonderful, it really flows. It's a great idea. You may not be the first one that had it. And, to clear to make sure there wasn't someone else that, whether it was months or years or decades ahead of you, had that same idea and has already employed it. That could be a really big kick in the pants.
Mm-hmm.
And another oddity in the world of intellectual property law, and this applies to the marketing people in the audience who might be listening. Most marketing people, and I'll use my 23-year-old daughter as an example, went to art school, has that artistic bent in them, and is now trying to do something commercial with it. And as an artist, copyright law primarily controls, and independent creation of something is an absolute defense. So if my daughter had never been exposed to the Mona Lisa and painted a painting that looked exactly like the Mona Lisa, that's not infringing because she never had any exposure to it and she independently created it. That same person then flips into the marketing world and has their independent creation of this brand name, and suddenly it is a problem. And so they're employing the rules that they were taught correctly as undergrads and younger people as artists to their adult life that we're not worried about the people continue painting, but the ones that jump to the marketing side of it. The rules have changed on them. And actually what's changed is the area of law that governs. And so it's confusing to a lot of people. These rules are not necessarily intuitive. And, that's one reason a person like me is a good consult to have, a good resource to have in your belt as you try to move forward.
Let's take a moment for a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of the Growth Catalyst Show was brought to you by Transcendent Sales Solutions. Whether your company is facing uncertainty, declining sales, or resource limitations, Transcendent Sales has the solution. Their team has decades of experience helping businesses find alignment to meet their growth goals and transforming underperforming sales organizations into revenue-producing market leaders. They take a hands-on, results-oriented approach to solving sales challenges. Visit transcendentsales.com to learn more and subscribe to the bi-weekly Growth Catalyst newsletter for insightful growth strategies. Transcendent Sales Solutions, empowering businesses to reach new heights. And now, back to the show.
You mentioned marketing a couple times. I'm guessing that social media and the whole internet has made your profession just boom.
Well, it totally has. And I mean, going back all the way to the beginning of this century or the end of last century, the .com bust back at the beginning of this century, or I can't remember what it was now, was something that actually had a big spike in my profession, a big drop. But ever since then, it's been a big spike because the ability for a small company to act like a big company and be in the same marketplaces as a big company is much greater. And also there's way more ability for more companies to be doing commerce. And, as you might imagine, there are only so many brands out there you can choose from. So the chances that they're all taken is getting greater and greater, although imagination will always allow you to come up with another great brand. But the chances of you tripping on someone else is greater than it was, say, 20 years ago.
Well, there's that protecting your brand, but then also not making sure that you're not, infringing on someone else's brand. Can you share like a couple stories always resonate, like a few stories that might have been in the news or something was like, oh, wow, I never would have thought that would have been an infringement.
I'm trying to think ones that have been in the news recently.
Or just, something in general that you can think of.
Well, a recent story I had that I think people can relate to. I won't use client names, but the story I think will resonate. Different marketing person. I have a lot of marketing people in my world of resources. So if you're listening and you're one of my marketing resources, I might not even be talking about you, but I'm certainly not talking about you twice here. A friend of mine who'd had a firm for a dozen years or so, marketing firm, had done quite well for himself. Had been using the same name for all this time and was really getting a lot of traction. And lo and behold, he received a cease and desist letter for using his name that he'd been using for nearly a dozen years at this point, saying you had to stop using your brand and you have to give us profits and all these other horrible sounding things. And, he was freaked out. He's like, this is my name. How can I be forced after all these years to give up my name? And going through the analysis with him, because he was growing, he might have had some rights to continue using his name in the limited geographic space, the limited service space that he was in the past. But looking at his growth trajectory, when he moved into other regions of the country and provide other marketing services, he wouldn't be able to do those under his old name. And the only thing that made sense was a rebrand himself. So here is a rebrand person going through a rebrand. And I see that story constantly. It's a refrain that I see over and over again. I love analogies, Dan. I know this isn't the story you're looking for, but I think this analogy sort of fits. I walk my dog every morning. My dog is the most lovable animal on this planet, but as dumb as a sack of hammers. She really doesn't know the difference between anything, but she's lovable. So anyhow, one part of our walk is along a busy road. We have a nice wide sidewalk to walk on. There's a beauty strip of grass. There's a curb. There's a white line. And then there's the asphalt. Of course, we as walkers and pedestrians are supposed to be on the sidewalk, and the cars are supposed to be on the asphalt. Well, my dog doesn't know the difference, and she would jump into the asphalt as quick as anything. And luckily, I have her on a leash, and so I keep her on the line. And so I sort of liken that to my clients who don't quite appreciate that they can't jump into the asphalt, that they can't just adopt this brand that's over here. And the asphalt's also a pretty good analogy because there's commerce going on over there. There's actual, people running down the road, and they will run over you, not because they're mean, but because they're in the middle of doing the thing they're doing in the place they're allowed to do it. And while the community might say, oh, woe is me, a dog got run over, the driver's like, I was doing the thing everyone asked me to do, and suddenly a dog jumps in front of me. I hate it, but I ran over it. And that's much like what happens with me and my small business clients. They jump into the asphalt, then they're like, why is the big company after you? They're not after you. They're doing the thing they were supposed to do. My goal is to let you know where the sidewalk is and where the asphalt is. And if I see a dog sitting in the middle of the road, I try to pull it off the road. And in a very, and again, back to the option thing, it's not really an option whether or not you get to choose the rules of the road. They're there. And maybe you have a moral issue with the way the traffic laws are, and you think people should be able to walk anywhere in the traffic anytime and tick up at your congressman. But as of right now, unless you're in a sidewalk or something like that, you can't just jump in front of a car and have an absolute expectation that it won't hit you. Maybe it'll try not to, but if it's doing the thing it's supposed to do, it'll hit you. So I really view my clients as much like I help my dog stay in the safe zone and thrive. I mean, we're on a walk for the health of my dog and the benefit of my dog and the joy of my dog. You thrive in the sidewalk. You die and perish in the asphalt. Let's stay in the sidewalk. Where is your sidewalk? Let me help you find it.
So if starting a business there's a lot to start a business. And I think the last thing that you're really thinking about when you start a business, or maybe it shouldn't be, is, oh, and I need to go and I need to protect this brand. Yes. What's the timing that businesses typically look at and say, okay, I have this business, I've hit this certain point. When should they start looking at doing that?
Dan, that's a great question. There's a lot of ways of looking at it. And one way I look at it, I think it's different than many attorneys, and it's because of my experience, is when is it relevant that you should be looking at it? And I look at it from the lens of, when did my big firm, large clients start to notice these small companies? When was it first going to be an issue? And it tended to be at a moment of scalability, a moment of growth, a moment of transition, when the company stopped being a baby and a toddler and started being a teen or a tween and started being bigger and doing bigger things. And those things pop up in a number of ways. It could be a company that's going through its very first big marketing campaign. It could be a company that in your world is finally getting a legitimate sales force and is actually attacking sales in a very legitimate way. It could be a company that is opening a second office, or maybe even moving from their home office to a real building, especially if it's a brick and mortar type of entity. Any of these things, or you're having a different line of products or services that you're offering. So you're just showing growth, or you merge with another company and your brand is going to be sticking with it. At those moments, your brand is going to be seen by more people. And going back to the marketing example, I often tell marketing people, if they are successful, their client's brand and the services that they offer, the products they offer, will be introduced to many people. And hopefully many of those people will be new consumers, and those consumers will actually buy from the client. Whether or not they like it, some of those people that are seeing it will be the competitors of the company, competitors that had never heard about the company before and might be getting their first introduction to the company. and they realize, wait a minute, their name, their tagline, their color scheme, their designs, their anything that's part of branding is a whole lot like mine. And it might lead to a cease and desist letter. So it's not the fault of the marketing company, or in your case, the fault of training the sales team. That's not what caused the infringement. The infringement is always there. You're just the messenger getting it out there. And suddenly people are able to see it in a way they didn't before. So that moment of transition is a moment that I'd really love to be involved in the client and help them understand what their risk is before they sink tens of thousands of dollars into something like what I just described in any of these fashions, or sometimes more than that. Before they sink that money in, let's make sure that the message that's delivered is one we want to be delivered, not one that's going to cause harm. So, that growth stage, which I find in terms of years of growth, tends to be between 3 and 5 years old, company-wise. Although I think I had more value at the very beginning, because I could have given you the exact same message 3 years ago. You would have already transitioned your brand when it didn't matter, and then have a brand that you already know is good as you go through that launch phase.
So what's the first step a business owner might be listening, thinking, maybe I need to do this? What's the first step that they can kind of get ready to start, exploring this and protecting their brand?
Brand protection is 4 steps. There's 4 different processes of brand protection. And number 1 is searching. And searching is a very easy thing, but a very difficult thing at the same time. We all have a lot of information available to us at our fingertips now through the internet and other resources. And so getting information is one thing. Knowing what to do with the information is another thing altogether. Me or a qualified attorney like me, and not any attorney, by the way, but one that practices intellectual property law, can help you understand based on the search. And like, for example, I have some tools I subscribe to that helps me get to a lot of different databases very efficiently and very easily. So I'm seeing all the relevant information and can make information based on informed decisions and give you a outlay of what's in front of you and help you develop a strategy. So searching is number 1. You can obviously contact me. Initiating Protection will share details of contact later on, or any other attorney that practices intellectual property law. And I can't stress that clearly enough. Your business attorney, your personal injury attorney, your divorce attorney, great people. I love them, but I don't do what they do. They don't do what I do.
Not their special sauce. Exactly.
The other step goes to the thing that most people think of when they think of me. Often when I tell people I'm a trademark attorney or an IP attorney, which are words I don't use too often unless I'm talking to other attorneys, I hear something back along the lines of, so you file trademark applications all day long. That'd be a pretty boring job. That'd be like back to my tax days pretty much, the type of thing I was trying to escape. And yes, I do file trademark applications. And yes, I do help get them all the way to registration, which is its own process in itself. But it's with the information I got from the search that I filed that. And I kind of compare it to, shooting a weapon or something. You want to look at the weapon first. Is it loaded? Is the safety off? Is it, otherwise safe? Am I in a safe place? Am I aiming at the thing I want to aim? Only after you've answered all those questions do you shoot the gun. You make sure everything else is in place first. And that's kind of what the search does for you. It opens your eyes as to what's going on, gives you a lot of information that's relevant. And only after you know what's going on with your risk are you comfortable in saying, okay, now I want to assert this right. And to give a simple analogy of what a trademark registration is like, it's most like recording a deed for your home, your property at the courthouse. You being on it is kind of evidence that you own the place. But the fact that you recorded that at the courthouse and now the government and everyone else who buys into the government has agreed to that, that's the proof of ownership that you really need. Could there be a dispute? Absolutely. But it's much harder. You have the presumption that you are the owner going into that argument.
Okay. Richard, this has been very educational. Last question for you. If somebody's interested in learning more about your services and initiating protection, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Many ways, Dan. I love phone calls. You can call me at 678-965-3268. You can reach me via email at richard@initiatingprotection.com, INITIATINGPROTEC tion.com. Or you can go to my website, which is also initiatingprotection.com, and learn more about me. You can follow me on socials. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. I also have an Instagram account, and would love to make a connection with you. And Dan, one thing I'd like to offer to everyone listening, I love having the conversation of what does this mean to my business? Because we've talked about a lot of hypotheticals, but the reality is everyone has a slightly different position. I don't charge for initial calls. I don't charge to let you understand what I could do for you and what benefit you would have out of this. Make a Calendly appointment. You can find links on my website. I'd love to have a 30-minute conversation with you and just learn more about your business and help you understand what value there is. I had a client yesterday after I explained in great detail, because this is a very curious person, what benefit there was to registering your brand, going through all this. And her question was, why doesn't everyone do this? I said, ma'am, if you can figure that out, I'd love to have the answer.
Richard, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time on the Growth Catalyst Show.
Thank you, Dan. Enjoyed being here.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Growth Catalyst Show. Remember, you can take these stories of growth and make them part of your own journey. Learn from them, draw inspiration, and let them guide your path of growth. I'm your host, Dan Mahoney, and I look forward to our next journey together. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, keep growing.